Hello. Frabjous day, Kalu Kalay. Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's running mate for 2020. How exciting, how much we've been waiting for this day with bated breath to have that doubt lifted from our shoulders. Not that there was that much doubt. She was the best candidate, the most suitable candidate. They had the best chemistry and energy together. She worked with Beau Biden, his son, who a war veteran who died of brain cancer, was an attorney general. He respects family and he respects accomplished Black women. And Joe Biden's election campaign was resurrected through the force and character of Black women in South Carolina, who put him back into contention for the leadership. So hooray, who freaking ray for today. Let's watch some cool things. My husband, I did not realize, got me some sparkling apple juice in advance, anticipating that Kamala Harris would win the nomination, would be selected by Joe Biden for his running mate. So I am day drinking sparkling apple juice. Sparkling apple juice. And I'm so happy. Oh my God, I'm so happy. So people are going online with stories about how even their conservative racist uncles are a little bit excited. There's an energy, there's a momentum. It's really hard for Trump to criticize Kamala Harris on race without antagonizing women. I know, in a fancy bottle. That's a good husband. That's a good husband. I don't drink alcohol really. Just doesn't, I don't love it. But I don't really like sparkling apple juice so much either. But I do, for a special occasion, like to do this. This is probably the first special occasion I've ever gotten out a champagne glass and some sparkling apple juice. But I am beside myself with joy. So I'm here online to share that joy with you, to watch ads that people are already starting to put together, showcasing Joe and Kamala together, and what this means. I hope it gives Americans a shot in the arm to, even right now, be loud and insistent. Pardon me. Oh, I have a comment. I thought they wanted to do away with the Electoral College. We do. It's like a vestigial limb of racist, slaveholding antecedents of America's foundations. But for now, it's there. Once you start a game, you work with the rules that are established, and the Electoral College is there. It's there to give power to rural states in the advent that there's a split in opinion between rural and urban states. It gives rural states an advantage over the voters in urban, more highly urbanized areas, more populated urban areas, because part of the Electoral College system was the 3/5 compromise, when the founding fathers gave wealthy white landowners the reassurance that even if they didn't have a lot of voters in their states, because the bodies in their states were a small number of wealthy white landowners and then a much larger number of exploited Black forced labor slaves who were generating the wealth. So the reassurance given to them was that they could count the bodies of their slaves in a population tally to go towards the calculation of representatives for the Electoral College selector process. So 3 out of every 5 slave bodies were counted. Doesn't mean they were given 3/5 of the rights of a normal voter. Doesn't mean anything was given to the slaves, but their bodies were used. 3 out of every 5 bodies were used to tabulate the population tally, to countervail against the actual numbers of white people who were allowed to vote in other states. It was a way of saying, don't worry, wealthy white slave owners, you can still have significant power, even disproportionate power, over your political system. That was how they brought them on board. That was how they unified the various disparate states before America was made into a nation, by reassuring those wealthy white slave owners that they would still get to exercise power over the process. So it's got nothing to do with fair representation for the entire country. Why would it be fair for some voters in some states to have disproportionate power relative to voters in other states? You don't have to balance California with Wyoming as if they're equal. This is part of the false balance bullshit that pervades the media. A voter in California should have the same weight as the vote of a voter in Wyoming, but that's not the case because of the perversions of the Electoral College system. So yes, that is part of the logical flaws in your racist argument. And it's racist in a passive way, in that your failure and your refusal to engage with the historical realities of the Electoral College system, which is not a logical sin limited to you. Many people suffer from that failure to engage with the historical realities of the Electoral College system. Yes, so, well, when you say so California should just pick the president, in democracies, a majority of voters pick the president. So yes, if a majority of voters live in California, then California does get, or the voters in California would get to help elect the president with the preponderance of votes for their candidate, whoever their chosen candidate is. That is the foundational principles of democracy, that a majority of people will act in the best interests of everyone as a whole, will act to avoid tyranny, will vote for a candidate who is better over a candidate who is worse. Whereas it turns out rural voters will vote for a worse candidate out of a last gasp clutch at power, as they fear that a changing American demographic will mean less power to white people. And they've had white grievance culture so pushed down their throat by all manner of Fox and right-wing radio and Breitbart, etc., that has convinced them for decades now that the only true racism in the United States is racism against white people, which is a nonsense and is based on historical denialism, is based on the flawed premise that racism against black people ended when slavery was abolished. And I say abolished because there's always that escape clause in the 13th Amendment that says you can enslave people, you can compel forced labor from them without payment if they are in the incarceration system, if they are incarcerated. That is the loophole in the 13th Amendment that allows people to still enrich themselves from the unpaid labor of enslaved people who are enslaved as a consequence of being incarcerated, which is a strongly motivational factor for continual residual racist elements in the judicial system, in the judicial system, and in the policing system, and in legislative systems to disproportionately target, investigate, stop, frisk, arrest, charge, convict black people for crimes that are just as evenly committed by white people. And I'm thinking of drug offenses here. But yes, that is one of the reasons why black people are so targeted, because there is that underlying understanding that slavery is still perpetuated through locking black people up unfairly for drug crimes that white people commit at equivalent rates, but are not similarly investigated, charged, prosecuted, convicted, etc. for. Trump ain't going to win per se, because he's not going to win in any legitimate way. I'm not guaranteeing anybody that Trump doesn't steal the election. Wow, your comment was muted about California. Yeah, well, dude, we don't really tolerate the propagation of racist arguments here. And it's a racist argument to claim that you need the Electoral College still to protect rural states from having less voters in them than more populous states. You shouldn't need to protect people for not existing. You shouldn't need to protect people from having lower numbers of voters. what you need is to protect the other people from a minority exercising dominance over the majority, because that is an invitation to tyranny, to exploit the system. And Donald Trump has exploited the baked-in racism in the Electoral College. Vladimir Putin has exploited the baked-in racism of the Electoral College. The popular voting results have been overturned before in American history. They've been overturned before whenever there has been a deeper divide between the opinions of people in urban areas and the people in rural areas. And that deepening occurred over the past few years because of the carefully cultivated antipathy towards the successful Black Democratic American president, namely President Obama, who has already pulled America out of one recession, the financial crisis of 2008, and now his Vice President Joe Biden will have to pull America out of the economic collapse that Trump and the GOP are engineering even as we speak, with their failure to provide stimulatory payments for those Americans who are suffering as the consequence of an uncontrolled pandemic that Trump, with murderous indifference, purposefully let ravage the United States. And when I say purposefully, dude was getting briefings in January. American intelligence agencies even let Israel know, hey, this pandemic seems serious. Israel was given warning. Governors around America were not given warnings. So they were flying blind. People did not have the information that Trump got in his intelligence briefings because he elected not to share it. He elected to keep it on the down low because his concern, and his primary concern in general, is to work on his campaign platform that the stock market is high because he's so economically competent. Trump keeps trying to pump up the stock market because that's his argument. Re-elect me because the stock market's high because I'm around. So he didn't share the knowledge that he gleaned from his intelligence briefings. There are billion-dollar agencies that exist to help the American people. They brief the president. The president would pass that on if he understood that there was information useful to the public. Zip. He said zip to the governors. He brushed it off because he wanted China's signature on a trade deal so that he could wave something in the face of the easily distracted media to say, don't let there be cable news saturation level reporting of the manufacturing recession that I created with my misbegotten instigation of a trade war with a majority of America's trading partners. Trump wanted that to be overlooked. He wanted China's signature on a trade deal so he could say, look, I did something. I made a deal, people. I made one. Didn't matter what it was like. He knows he has enough hold on the imagination of, he had enough hold on the imagination of white voters in America that he could continue to have their support just by saying some bullshit that was at least slightly plausible. Great trade deal. I'm the dealster. You've seen me in The Apprentice. Look at me now. Work my magic over deals. Regardless of the reality that the manufacturing sector had experienced 4 consecutive months of contraction, and that was having a spillover effect into adjacent industries, namely transport and storage, which are adjacent to the manufacturing industry. And once one industry is in recession, you get less need for trucks to carry around goods across country when the manufacturing industry is not buying or selling goods as much, and people aren't storing goods. So yes, there was a recession being reported on in some print and online publications in October of 2019. So Trump was highly motivated to lie to the American people and to lie to the governors who at least could have taken action in January and February if Trump had disclosed to them what he knew. They could have taken action. They didn't have the same resources at their disposal as a president has, as the leader of the federal government has. They do not have the legislative power to enact the Defense Production Act. They could not themselves personally compel companies to start manufacturing masks as a preventative measure, particularly N95 masks, which are necessary for medical professionals because they have a high degree of protection against viral or penetration by viral particles. Oh, there's some new comments that I haven't seen. Thank you for commending me on my passion. I'd wish you best of luck to you too, but if you support a mass murderer, then I find it difficult to send those best wishes your way. But I guess as an arbitrary exercise of loving kindness meditation, I could say, I hope that you are less misguided going forwards and that your journey takes you to a place where you can find more enlightenment in relation to the mass murderer who currently has the reins of your country. And even though we're so excited about Kamala Harris being the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, even today, Trump is still sabotaging America's ability to act. He's failing to evoke the Defense Production Act to command domestic production of N95 masks. America was a world marvel during World War II. It was pumping out planes every few hours or every few days. It was doing extraordinary things at a manufacturing level to defeat an enemy, to defeat a crisis. Well, Trump's happy to call the virus, the COVID-19 virus, the China virus. He's happy to call it the invisible enemy. What he's not happy to do is lift a freaking finger to do anything about it. And there's been exposés that he allowed his son-in-law to be part of a team that was working on a nationalized testing strategy, working together to put together resources to have testing ramped up around the nation so you could identify not only cases, but the asymptomatic cases who are often a critical part of transmitting the virus. Because someone without obvious symptoms can go to church, can go to a concert, can go to a mass event and give the virus, pass on the virus through talking, through singing, through yell speech, through normal speech. They can exhale enough aerosolized droplets containing viral particles to infect people around them. And we've seen this over and over again documented by contact tracing events that have traced people contaminated at a restaurant, and even more contamination occurred at a choir practice. This is a virus that is capable of being aerosolized by speech and by song and by yelling. So if you're ever confronted by a maggot who refuses to wear a mask and starts violently yelling in your face because they've been brainwashed by hate groups flourishing on Facebook, QAnon cults and anti-mask cults, if they're yelling in your face, get the hell away from them. Because even if you're wearing a mask, if it's not an N95 mask, you don't have adequate protection from someone yelling in your face, because that has additional aerosolized expelling of droplets right into your eyes and towards your nose and mouth. And a cloth mask isn't going to provide you adequate enough attention for that level of assault on your person. So yeah, if you had a face shield, which, a plastic shield is going to block out droplets directly propelled towards you, as long as it's a short period of time. If you're in a room with someone who's speaking and yelling for a while, there's the potential for you to breathe in airflow that contains a lot of these aerosolized droplets. But if you get aerosolized droplets containing viral particles straight into the membranes of your eyes, your conjunctiva, not many people know, but the eyes are actually a significant point of egress into your body for viruses and for bacteria. When you get colds, normally during the cold season, it might very well be because you've touched your eyes too much. And that's why hand hygiene going forwards is a good idea during cold and flu season. And people might even continue to wear masks during winter to prevent the dissemination of the common cold and the flu. Critter 1667 points out that wait till after the Sturgis spread. Yes, the motorcycle rallies, at least they were outside, I think, some of those events, or the majority of those events, because people weren't wearing masks, which is bad, but outside you have at least better air ventilation, which disperses some of those viral particles. M95, do you mean N95 mask? Yes, all states are going there. So it's very risky for spreading the mask across America and spreading the virus across America. Yes, I'm just talking about how conditions for viral transmission are less optimal if you're outside relative to being inside. Inside is very bad. Are you talking about the valves? Yes, valves on N95 masks are not good. There's been some more research conducted lately that shows thin neck bandanas that you just pull up over your face. They're not good. Fleece is worse because it breaks up the droplets into smaller droplets as they are expelled from your mouth. So that's the worst thing you can use is a fleece mask. Oh my gosh, I've just remembered seeing someone share what an American state distributed to their teachers, and they said made from jumper material. So they probably were made from fleece. There's probably been a broad issuance of masks that are basically almost worse than doing nothing, issued to teachers. Yes, I didn't read the report, but I did see the Twitter thread. So we'll have a look at my Twitter account and see what's what. Oh, look, this is just exciting because Sean King is a fraud who steals money from people. He's been exposed in the Daily Beast, but I've seen for a long time Twitter accounts explain that they might have signed up to give Sean King money for something and then cancelled their commitment, and the account has continued to draw money from them. And they've tried to chase Sean King for a refund, and he's been very much like, oh yeah, I'll get on that, and then just been uncontactable. The dude is a criminal and a financial fraud. But here he is saying on the 14th of November 2018, that he'll be frank and tell you, two Democrats, that he's 99% sure he won't be supporting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And then today, he's incredibly proud to see a brilliant Black woman, an HBCU grad, chosen as a vice presidential nominee. He's right that she is the most progressive vice presidential nominee in American history. She has one of the most progressive records in history. The surgical masks are good. They are better than the cloth masks. All right, let's have a listen to this ad. 1.3 million views already.
Who raised me and my sister.
Wait.
Was my mother, who raised me and my sister, was a proud woman. She was a brown woman. She was a woman with a heavy accent. She was a woman who many times people would overlook her or not take her seriously, or because of her accent, assume things about her intelligence. Now, every time my mother proved them wrong. Every time she proved them wrong. And because of who my mother was and what she believed, what she had the ability to dream was possible and then work to make possible, the fact that my mother never asked anyone permission to tell her what was possible is why within one generation I stand here as a serious candidate for President of the United States. My mother
isn't that
raised
awesome?
Me and my sister.
She never asked anyone for permission. She is going to walk all over Pence if he even can resolve himself to not make an excuse and avoid debating with her. Yeah, she didn't really attack his record. She scaffolded off Joe Biden to point out that he had some reluctance to seeing the merits of busing to integrate America's schooling. He thought it would antagonize parents too much to have to send their children on buses to go to districts away from their homes. And it did antagonize parents. There's a lot of resistance to integration, to desegregation in America because a lot of people are racist. So Biden was right, but ethically he was wrong in that it was good for America overall. to have integrated schools and to have busing. And Kamala Harris was able to point that out, that she was one of those children who was bused to another school, who was part of the integrating of American schools. So she used his experience to riff off and point to her experience in being part of that change that has grown America, that has benefited America, that has brought America closer to a more actualized version of its own ideals of harmony and mutual benefit and inclusion of people regardless of skin color. So no, she didn't attack Joe Biden, and he didn't have a record on busing per se. He had an attitude. Oh, Chris, hello. Exactly. And Biden's been around for a while. He has just had more opportunity to see the positive side of busing, that regardless of the antagonism of some white people, sometimes America has needed to be dragged kicking and screaming towards a more realized form of equality and inclusion. And that, yes, there's backlash, but the key is not to repudiate the steps forward, but to acknowledge and maybe even seek to manage the backlash, not with conciliatory measures to say, okay, racists, here, in the interest of balance, you can have some of what you want, and we'll let the pro-equality people have some of what they want. The idea is you prepare for the backlash and say, okay, what are we going to do to minimize the potential impact of racists, and how can we prevent racists from organizing in the way that Germany does when Germany outlaws swastikas. You know, America could have outlawed the Confederate flag earlier. It could have taken down its Confederate monuments earlier. It could have given haters and racists less of a focal point to feel victorious around. We could have shamed them more into a corner. More could have been done. And now, here we are. I'm so sorry my Periscope cuts off for you every time. I hope it doesn't work like that for everyone. But internet, the vagaries of the internet. All right, so that was a beautiful ad to watch. I'm almost tempted to watch it again, but maybe later. There's so much to celebrate. Oh, here's another one. Oh, this is a great one. Okay. I don't know who made it. The Democratic Coalition made it. Okay.
I believe in Joe. I really believe in him, and I have known him for a long time.
Vice President.
Joe Biden has selected Kamala Harris as his running mate.
If we stop fighting, we will never get there, and so we fight. That is the strength of who we are as a nation. The strength of who we are as a nation has always been about fighting for our ideals.
Look, Senator Harris is the capacity to be anything she wants to be.
One of the things that we need right now is we need a leader who really does care about the people.
Yes.
And who can therefore unify the people. And I believe Joe can do that.
She can be president someday herself.
And
healthcare justice is on the ballot in 2020. Environmental justice is on the ballot in 2020. Racial justice is on the ballot in 2020. And Joe Biden is on the ballot in 2020.
Joe Biden has chosen Kamala Harris as his running mate.
We will elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States.
Character, empathy, experience. Vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2020.
The Democratic Coalition is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So yes, that's not an official Biden ad, but it's good. Character, empathy, experience. Does anybody want to see blackmailed sellout Lindsey Graham explain that anybody who doesn't like Joe Biden has something wrong with them because he has such a good character, and describe Trump as a nut job and a loser and ill-suited to be president? Let's watch that too.
If you can't admire Joe Biden as a person, then it's probably you got a problem. You need to do some self-evaluation, because what's not to like? I called him after Bo died. And he basically said, well, Bo was my soul. Tall for a long time. He came to my ceremony and said some of the most incredibly heartfelt things that anybody could ever say to me. And he's the nicest person I think I've ever met in politics.
I'm just going to pause that and say maybe John McCain was Lindsey Graham's soul. Although that would be then buying into that suggestion that Bo was Biden's soul, and Biden still has a soul. Unlike Lindsey Graham, who's prepared to stand back and let so many thousands of Americans, tens of thousands of Americans die under the malign influence of the corrupt sociopath in power at present. But yes.
Man as God ever created. If you can't admire Joe Biden as a person, then it's probably you got a problem. You need to do some self-evaluation. Because what's not to like? I called him after Bo. He came to my ceremony. Incredibly heartfelt things that anybody could ever say to me. And he's the nicest person I think I've ever met in politics. He is as good a man as God ever created. If you can't admire Joe Biden as
all right, so that's just Lindsey saying nice things about Joe Biden, that he's as good a man as God ever created. So we don't have the selection of Lindsey saying bad things about Trump, but you've probably already seen them. Let's have a little look at some of these Texas statistics, which are concerning. It's hard that we have to wait so long for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to win the election and to take power and to try and turn the situation around, because a virus that spreads exponentially is spreading exponentially in the United States. So that's the downside of today, that millions of people are likely being evicted over the coming days. Millions of people. 25, potentially 30 million people stand to lose their places of residence and then have to live out of their cars if they're lucky enough to have cars. And all right, so key numbers for Texas. The number of tests are down 50%. So they were doing 60,000 tests, and now they're doing 30,000 tests. Cases largely flat, but percent positive way up, 24%, indicating that they're under testing now. And it could be to do with the fact that, poverty is really hitting Texas hard. So you can't go to get a test if you're worried about where you live and living on the street and you're just trying to make some living arrangements. So the projections model suggests that Texas actually has 10 times more cases than identified. They think that Texas might have 70,000 cases a day. What? Wow. Okay, so that website for projections is covid19projections.com. If you want to check that out for yourself, if you live in Texas, I'm sorry for you. So it's likely that they're missing 90% of the cases. And talk now is about restarting schools and sports, especially football, but it's not a responsible thing to do without control measures. If Texas wants to lower virus levels, your governor would enforce mask mandates, keep bars closed, stop indoor gatherings, and that includes church gatherings. It just doesn't fit with the Republican model of contrarianism, which is to pander to people who think that their rights to own guns or go to church in a pandemic outweighs other people's rights to live and be safe and to have lungs that function and brains that aren't neurologically damaged and hearts that aren't inflamed and damaged, and kidneys and pancreases that work, because all of those organs are implicated with damage from even mild cases of the coronavirus. Oh, and the fourth step was to fix testing so more rapid turnaround testing is available. So this doctor, and he is, I think he's a Harvard medical, he's a physician, researcher, and advocate for the notion that an ounce of data is worth 1,000 pounds of opinion. the director of Harvard something. Could be Harvard Science Research. Let's have a look. Harvard Global Health Institute. Okay, that's pretty important. Okay, so he's the head of Harvard Global Health Institute. Poor bloody Texas, along with poor bloody Florida. Okay, this is a parody in that the language from Kayleigh McEnany is accurate, but the drawings are fabricated, but it's funny. So we're going to look at it safe in the understanding that, yes, we get it. It's got some drawing in it. We're just doing it for the laughs, because to laugh at tyrants is to remove some of their power, because some of their power is exercised through the creation of fear and intimidation. Half of a tyrant's power is through gathering people into the corrupt folds, through the excitement of proximity to power and the delusions of shared impotence, not impotence, omnipotence, which means being all-powerful. So people who still align themselves with Trump think, yeah, we're so powerful, we can build walls, we can take children away from their parents, and we don't care. We can do all manner of things because we are with Trump, and he is like a god and a king. We can sacrifice democratic standards. You know, we don't care about free and fair elections anymore. We just want Trump because we want to make you cry, you people who respect democracy, you people who respect the Constitution, you people who respect freedom from tyranny. We want to see your tears. And that's the drunkenness of being affiliated with Trump if you're a Trump voter. And if you're someone directly connected to Trump, then you're a grifter who seeks the elevation of your personal power and the potential access to wealth that comes from being on board with a kleptocracy, a collection of corrupt, tyrannical people who will steal blind from you, who will step over your dead body, over piles of your dead bodies to get something more for themselves. They are without principle or conscience, like Kayleigh McEnany.
The Trump administration threw out the pandemic response playbook left by the Obama-Biden administration. What the critics failed to note, however, is that this thin packet of paper was replaced by 2 detailed, robust pandemic response reports commissioned by the Trump administration. So we exchanged this one, which I will hand over to my assistant, Wendy, for these 2 pandemic response plans. The Trump administration threw out the pandemic response playbook.
Well, it's true. They did throw out the highly detailed, comprehensive pandemic playbook left by the Obama administration, including Ronald Klein, who's working with Joe Biden now, but who they had worked so hard on developing a system of responding effectively to mitigate the threat of a pandemic on the American people and on the American economy. So Terrapin Mark has a hard time seeing her because she's such a liar. Oh, McEnemy instead of McEnany. Interesting. Yes, you're Bob, but you don't have email. And yes, his press secretary is a big enabler. I think his top enabler, though, would be Bill Barr. Bill Barr would have to take the prize for enabling Trump to evade oversight, investigation, and exposure for investigations that did occur, such as the Mueller investigation, but which have Bill Barr to lie to the media, the credulous media and the credulous public about what was contained in the Mueller report, which was damning evidence that Trump obstructed justice and involved others in obstructing justice on his behalf, etc. All right, let's. Here's a new one. Let's see what this one is. It's a historic night.
Pick. The presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party has chosen Kamala Harris. California senator and a former rival for the Democratic Party nomination, to run with him against President Trump and Mike Pence. She is 55 years old, was elected to the Senate in 2016. She's a historic choice.
The first Black woman and first Indian American ever on a major party ticket.
She served as district attorney in San Francisco, attorney general in California.
Has been an aggressive questioner in nationally televised hearings of members of this administration.
And a competitor against Joe Biden during the presidential race.
She ended her campaign in December, and one of the big debate moments was between Harris and Biden over race relations.
And that little girl was me. He was really hurt, he was really upset, and he was really angry, but he's putting that behind him.
Emulating in a lot of ways the Obama process itself.
Looking for someone that he's simpatico with.
There was so much pressure on Biden to pick not only a woman of color, but a Black woman.
And this is the one everyone expected.
But if you think about the long history of women in this country, of Black women in this country, trying to have a voice, Black women trying to be included as women in the 19th Amendment.
This is a historic decision without question.
My ancestors are rejoicing tonight.
We know we will be hearing from them tomorrow, delivering remarks side by side.
This, without a question, is the biggest decision Joe Biden has made in his long political life. He clearly felt comfortable with her, and we'll certainly see how this partnership unfolds.
Yeah. So that's good. And I agree with your suggestion of play a video of Kamala questioning Barr, because that is good. I'll have to have a quick look for it. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I can probably get it by typing something into the search bar. Kamala questioning Barr. And then go to videos. All right, so people are linking to YouTube videos of it, which I will access, but I hope they're not too long. Oh, it's 8 minutes. We'll watch a bit of it. We'll watch a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Barr, has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone?
I wouldn't.
Yes or no?
Could you repeat that question?
I will repeat it.
Could you repeat that question?
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
President or anybody else?
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grapple with the word suggest. I mean, there have been discussions of matters out there that they have not asked me to open an investigation. But
perhaps they've suggested?
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
Hinted?
I don't know.
Inferred? You don't know. Okay. In your March 24th summary, you wrote that, quote, after reviewing the special counsel's final report.
But I will say that no one.
Sir, I'm asking a question. In your March 24th summary, you wrote that, quote, after reviewing the special counsel's final report, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense. Now, the special counsel's investigation produced a great deal of evidence. I'm led to believe it included witnesses' notes and emails, witnesses' congressional testimony, witnesses' interviews, which were summarized in the FBI 302 forms, former FBI Director Comey's memos, and the president's public statements. My question is, in reaching your conclusion, did you personally review all of the underlying evidence?
No, we took and accepted. We accepted.
Mr. Rosenstein?
No, we accepted the statements in the report as the factual record. We did not go underneath it to see whether or not they were accurate. We accepted it as accurate. And made our.
So you accepted the report as the evidence?
Yes.
You did not question or look at the underlying evidence that supports the conclusions in the report?
No.
And also he misrepresented the conclusions in the report.
The evidence that underlines and supports the conclusions in the report, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge. We accepted the statements in the report,
Did
and the
anyone in your
characterization of the evidence is true.
Did anyone in your executive office review the evidence supporting the report?
No.
No.
Nobody.
Yet you
Nobody.
represented to the American public that the evidence was not, quote, sufficient to support an obstruction of justice offense.
The evidence presented in the report. This is not a mysterious process. In the Department of Justice, we have pros memos and declination memos every day coming up, and we don't go and look at the underlying evidence.
Sir, would you
we
support
take the characterization of the evidence as true?
As the Attorney General of the United States, you run the United States Department of Justice. If in any U.S. Attorney's office around the country, the head of that office, when being asked to make a critical decision about, in this case, the person who holds the highest office in the land, and whether or not that person committed a crime, would you accept them recommending a charging decision to you if they had not reviewed the evidence?
Well, that's a question for Bob Mueller. He's the U.S. Attorney. He's the one who presents the report.
But it was you who made the charging decision, sir. You made the decision not to charge the president.
So, in a pros memo and in a declination memo,
you said it was your baby. What did you mean by that?
It was my baby to decide whether or not to disclose it to the public.
And whose decision was it? Who had the power to make the decision about whether or not the evidence was sufficient to make a determination of whether there had been an obstruction of justice?
Prosecution memos go up to the supervisor. In this case, it was the...
Oh, blah, blah. It's just lies from him anyway. I've heard Kamala be awesome. She is awesome. And yeah. But the thing is, we get excited about the mic drops because we still hope that facts sway people. And facts sway reasonable people. But too many people were drunk on the passive or active white supremacism of giving Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt over and over again, and giving Donald Trump's satellites, his enablers, the benefit of the doubt over and over again. So people who don't engage with politics, people who don't even know that Bill Barr is the Attorney General, have no idea that Barr stopped Trump from being prosecuted for obstruction of justice, that Barr made charging decisions to say, I don't think there's a reason to charge Trump with obstruction of justice because I haven't reviewed the underlying evidence, but I'm going to misinterpret Mueller's report to say that it doesn't tell me that we should make a charging decision. Mueller's report says, here is a lot of evidence. He kind of implies, over to you, Congress, but it was made harder for Congress by Barr getting in front of that report before it was released and also redacting it to the point where we didn't get to see a lot of the critical evidence, and misinforming the public and misinforming the media to say there is nothing here. The president did nothing wrong, despite 11 obstructive acts that were described comprehensively in the Mueller report. And many of them met the elements needed for a prosecutorial commitment to charge. Nexus to, which means proximity. So proximity to knowing that there's an investigation, nexus to investigation. So if Trump knows he's being investigated and does something to obstruct justice, that's what you need to establish as a prosecutor. That proximity, that knowledge of, oh, investigation's happening now, an intent established. And there are some other elements as well that I don't remember because I'm not a lawyer. But I remember seeing a lot of graphs made by lawyers with obstructive elements ticked off to say, yes, any prosecutor worth their salt would proceed with prosecuting Trump and the people involved in these obstructive acts for obstruction of justice, which is a critical plank of the legal system, to be able to investigate crimes and to punish people who obstruct the investigation of crimes. Because if you don't prosecute obstruction of justice, then you give passes to gangsters, to kill witnesses, to commit crimes, to burn documents, to do anything they can to cover up, knowing that there is not punishment for obstruction of justice. you need to punish obstruction of justice in order to have justice. So yes, Bill Barr helped Trump get away with sabotaging the United States and sabotaging the system of justice and the rule of law in the United States. Oh, that makes my day, someone who recognizes me that, yes, I have been supporting her for a long time. I didn't support her as a presidential candidate, not because of personal antipathy, but because I did not believe or wish to trust the American electorate again with a female candidate for president. But I'm perfectly happy to trust the American electorate with a second-in-command woman who will be a little bit like a Trojan horse to smooth the path for America to come to accept a female president. So yes, further down the track. And I know she will be very powerful as a vice president because she has a great working relationship with Joe Biden. He respects her. He respects the work she did alongside of his son, who was also an attorney general. He respects what she brings to the table with her perspective as a woman of color in the United States, of both African American heritage and Southeast Asian heritage, a mother from India and a father from Jamaica, and an experience of being Black growing up in the United States. So she understands, and she understands very viscerally and prioritizes very viscerally that the maternal death rate for Black mothers in the United States is 2 to 3 times the rate of death, maternal death, for white women in the United States. Oh, this troll comment is a classic, and I'm going to have to pour some more sparkling apple juice for that. What about Obama spying on Trump's champagne? Indeed. Obama didn't spy on Trump's champagne. I doubt the champagne would have yielded any insights, but Trump was being investigated for colluding with Russia because of the mountain of evidence suggesting that he was colluding with Russia. His campaign manager, Paul Manafort, had to leave his campaign at a visible level because of his involvement with Russia, his involvement with pushing Putin-sponsored candidates into power in Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. Oh yes, leftover Trump champagne from one of his many failed products. Kamala Harris has brought up maternal mortality rate more than any other candidate. I'm still stuck on this though, it's so good. So good. What about Obama spying on Trump's champagne? They sound delightfully drunk in a way that's a microcosm of the separation from reality that occurs when you hitch your intellectual wagon to a sociopath like Donald Trump and his minions. And yes, we all hope that Barr will be held accountable. They're really going all in with the whole let's try and steal the election and be treasonous, etc., because they know that jail cells potentially await them because of how many times they have willfully and cheerfully violated American laws. It would have been very negligent if the FBI had not investigated the Trump campaign. And it feels kind of negligent that the head of the FBI didn't mention to the American people that one candidate was under investigation for ties to Russia, when he did mention 2 weeks out from the election that the other candidate was under investigation because her sex offender, not her sex offender, the sex offender husband of one of her close aides, Huma Abedin, and her husband, Anthony Weiner, had a laptop that had emails sent from Hillary Clinton that were a copy of emails that had already been investigated, but because they had these replica emails, they had to check them. The FBI was going to sort through and check if there was any new information to indicate that, what is it called when you can't show things to people? Confidential information they had to check whether or not there was confidential information, classified information in those emails. And the FBI did not really investigate that in a timely fashion. They did a go slow on it until James Comey had to step in himself and go, oh, actually, they seem to be emails that we've already looked at. But he went and told the public before he looked at those emails, yep, there's some more investigation launching now because we found some more emails on this laptop that's been confiscated from Anthony Sodewina. The dude who couldn't keep it in his pants. Yep, we own him. He's a Democrat, and he went online and tried to groom 15-year-old girls to exchange sexualized pictures. He's a bad person. And I'm sorry that Hoomer didn't leave him the first time he was exposed for adultery. It's a shame. Addictions and mental defects and personality defects can be very powerful. And yes, certainly using a non-governmental server is common practice for Trump's people. And in Hillary's case, it was barely a non-governmental server because a government server was established in her home for the use of her former president husband. I mean, you'd still call him President Clinton. And he had a server in his basement, and that was a server she used for her personal emails, and did occasionally send, she sent some official ones, but not classified ones. The investigation cleared her and said, didn't do anything wrong, but not really recommended. And James Comey is too proud, really, to admit what a terrible thing it was that he violated protocol in doing that 2 weeks out before the election, announcing some more investigations. But he also doesn't admit in public that he was being held hostage effectively by bad actors in the New York Bureau of the FBI, who were so pro-Trump that they were threatening that they would leak the fact that they'd found more Clinton emails on Huma Abedin's laptop, or Anthony Weiner's laptop, whoever the laptop belonged to, that they were going to leak it. And James Comey thought that would reflect badly on Clinton and the FBI. So in a fit of compulsion to protect the FBI and to protect Hillary Clinton, well, he claims it was to protect Hillary Clinton, that she would become president, and he didn't want there to be any accusation that the FBI had favored her, so that he had to go public, even though that was in direct violation of the FBI rules about announcing investigations close to an election. And he did that all the while knowing there was an investigation that the American public just didn't know about. And he did so in his hubris and overconfidence that the American public would never vote in a candidate like Donald Trump. And the reason why James Comey was so pig ignorant about the degree to which racism is a persevering problem within American society is because James Comey was a Republican and therefore mired in denialism about his own party and the voters, and the loyalties and priorities of the voters who vote for that Republican Party that paid lip service to the idea of fiscal conservatism, but really had been all in for many years in trying to sabotage a Black American Democratic president. So I bought James Comey's book, which I could regret a little bit because it's funding the man who did so much, whose overconfidence and personal hubris did so much to destroy American democracy by facilitating a bad cheating man to get into power. And once you've let a cheater win a democracy and he can then avail himself of all the resources of that superpower, it makes it exponentially more difficult to extricate yourself, especially to extricate your country without a human cost. And the human cost of Trump's presidency has obviously been significant. So I've been chatting for nearly an hour now, which I know is unnecessary. I will go. Thank you so much to everyone who has been with us for this broadcast. I'm just seeing if there's any more exciting ads before we've seen that ad. QAnon groups are growing at a rapid pace around the world. If you want to read the article, Google QAnon Facebook groups and the publication theguardian.com. I might have to read that later, but it is scary. We do have to keep an eye on it, because who is going to help protect us from these crazed Q people? They're the people who are so detached from reality now that you'll find them shouting at people in shops because they've been asked to wear masks. Oh, this is a good concluding thing to watch. Okay. Athletes can't play, children can't go to school, adults can't even go to the grocery store without worrying about catching COVID-19 and dying, because Trump, Pence, and Jared Kushner threw away Biden-Obama's pandemic response plan and ignored the coronavirus. It's likely that over 200,000 people are dead.
So for those of us who served in the Obama administration and worked on the Ebola response, it was a really enlightening and jarring and frightening experience, because I think it helped us to understand just how vulnerable the world remained to a disease that could be a lot scarier than Ebola. Ebola was a very scary disease if you caught it, but the chances of catching it, the chances of it spreading on a global level were very small. So I think a lot of us came away from that thinking, my goodness, we are nowhere near where we need to be for something that would be much more transmissible. And so there was a lot of energy in the last few years of the Obama administration to try and put in place what we could to leave the government in a better place. One was to set up a team at the White House that was solely dedicated to health security preparedness and response. The idea there was having a cell of people at the White House who could pull together all of the different parts of the federal government that had a role in this. And, you know, you think of all those parts. It's Homeland Security for the immigration and border stuff. It's the FAA for the airlines and the air travel. It's, of course, CDC and Health and Human Services. It's USAID for the overseas part. You know, it's a very complex operation, and you need that core of expertise at the White House that know where those capabilities sit, and the government knows how to make them work together. Then that new team at the White House pulled together what we call the playbook. That was a document that laid out the different stages of readiness that the federal government would need to go through. Okay, here are the indicators that suggest that you're in the lowest phase of activation. And if you see these indicators, you need to move up to this phase of activation. And here are the key questions you need to ask. Here are the different parts of the government you need to be talking to. One of the things that was identified as an early priority was testing. PPE availability, personal protective equipment, was another priority focus within that document, because we knew that was an area of potential weakness. And so that would have to be an early focus if we saw a novel virus overseas. And it was very explicit in the document that something like COVID should set off alarm bells. The document specifically talked about a novel virus, meaning a virus we hadn't seen before, for which we had no medical countermeasures, and which was showing the ability to efficiently spread from human to human. It was very explicit in the document that that sort of scenario needed to trigger great concern and a lot of active preparation. And I think what we saw instead, partly because they ignored that playbook, was that scenario emerged overseas, and the main response of the Trump administration initially was just to shut down travel from China and to basically assure the American public that the risk was low, but not to trigger the sort of domestic readiness measures that were very explicitly laid out in that document. So initially, when the Trump administration came in, they retained the pandemic preparedness team at the White House. But when John Bolton arrived as the national security advisor, he got rid of that team. The playbook that we left behind clearly was not used, because if they had asked themselves some of those very basic questions at the beginning of this, I think they'd have been in a very different place than they now are. Biologists and virologists and pandemic planners have been pointing out for years that it was basically inevitable that we would see another novel pathogen at some point that would combine very high transmissibility with a significant case fatality rate. To anyone who had worked pandemic preparedness before, it was very clear in late January that we were facing a huge risk in the United States. Watching what was happening in Wuhan, with hospitals being overwhelmed, with the aggressive spread of the virus, there was no reason to look at that and think that we were not equally vulnerable to that here in this country. But we were lucky. We had a head start that China didn't have. We had time to prepare. However, to trigger that preparation, the federal government needed to say very loudly and very forthrightly, but very calmly and professionally, this is a real risk. Hospitals need to be preparing. The public needs to be preparing. You need to be preparing for disruption in your lives. And that wasn't being said. That, in effect, sent a message to hospital executives and to the public and to business leaders that basically this was under control and they didn't need to make any major adjustments. And that was how it was heard. And it was just clearly the wrong message. And part of the reason now we're in such a scramble is because of that poor messaging and that poor risk assessment that we saw throughout the whole month of February from the administration. And I think what is strongly suggested by the reporting of the president's preferences on this is that he didn't want that kind of forward-leaning risk messaging. He was worried that it would spook the stock markets. It's very frustrating for those of us who have worked these issues from inside the government, who know how this works and how it should be done, to then see him try to avoid any responsibility and
Oh, that's all from me. Yes, I am super excited about Kamala's climate proposals with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's a great suggestion that there are libraries if you want to read a book without buying it. I did give it as a present to my father, and I bought it to read on an airplane, which I didn't do. I read a chapter. But yes, libraries next time. Thank you for the tip, and better on the planet as well, with less production environmental costs. That is all good stuff inside climate news. I'll check it out. I am more happy for the future of the planet and more hopeful for my children should Kamala and Joe come into power, that they will take America forwards in a positive direction and re-sign back to the Paris Climate Agreement, and maybe even coordinate more agreements that will help reduce the number of people who die as a consequence of climate change and increasingly frequent and severe extreme weather events, and increasing crop failure and increased rising sea levels and increased deaths from heat exhaustion and from exposure to temperatures that don't support human life. I'm hopeful for all of those things under Kamala and Joe. So thank you again for being with me for this broadcast. I hope you have a great rest for this evening, and I may see you tomorrow. If you've enjoyed the broadcast, please consider recommending this broadcast to your friends. I broadcast regularly. I'm here to embolden Americans and help them not to succumb to demoralization, to help keep that energy up and present information in as clear a way as I possibly can. I thank you. Thank you. If you're moved to throw even more assistance in my direction, I welcome constructive feedback. I enjoy compliments, constructive compliments, and I have a Patreon account and a YouTube channel and even a website, davcat43.com. So, which I post things to. And a Twitter account. So if you want to follow me some more ways, it's possible. Thank you again to everyone. Au revoir. And peace out. Thank you for your engagement. DF. Bye.